accordingly. I mean, they're some of the nicest people I've ever run into, almost every single one of them. So I'm, proud to be connected to it. I mean, I feel real honored to be involved with these people.
That's awesome. And you plan on going to any other conventions this year, or?
The next one will be in Auckland, New Zealand in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
We'll be there. They have a big series of conventions, from what I understand, called Armageddon. And they have them in 2 or 3 cities in New Zealand and 2 or 3 cities in Australia. So we'll be going to the one in Auckland for a few days in a couple of weeks. I've been to, there's a big con up in Toronto earlier this summer I was at. There was one in Calgary. And again, I mean, that's a whole nother, that gives you some idea of how big this thing is, because the one in Toronto, for example, there's 20,000 people there.
Wow.
Comic-Con, everybody knows in San Diego, what they draw 125,000 people, something like that this year. There is a huge interest and a huge fan base here that is formidable. And I know that the makers of the games, the ones who are successful, pay attention to the fans. If they don't, they're not going to have a clue, what to do. The ones who do, and Bungie, I think, is a leader in that capacity. Is they're very focused in on the fan base and what the fans want, and they provide avenues for input and that kind of thing, and they listen to what the fans have to say.
Indeed. And what about the live-action Halo movie? Supposedly people were talking about.
Right.
Do you know anything about that?
I really don't know anything more than probably you know. I know that they were a few years ago, shortly after Halo 3 came out, Peter Jackson was officially signed on as executive producer. He contacted a guy that he was, whose work he admired, Neil Blomkamp. Together they worked on a script. They actually did some small pre-production pieces in preparation for doing the movie, and it was about ready to go into pre-production. And then Hollywood sort of got involved, and studios got involved, and the long and the short of it is the whole thing fell apart. There will be a Halo movie made. There's just too much at stake for it not to happen. I think that Bungie and I think Microsoft are very protective of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And, the truth of the matter is they could throw up anything and people would go see it.
Oh, yeah,
They may not like it if it's not a good film, but just the name itself will draw in hundreds of thousands of people. They're not going for, as they say, the short money. I think they want to make a movie that is on par with the game.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's something that is as good in a film sense as the game is in the gaming world. And as you know, there's not been a lot of success in transferring games to motion pictures.
Oh yeah,
There's a handful that have ended up being respectable movies, and I think if and when they finally get around to making a Halo movie, it's either going to be a well done movie or it's not going to get made at all.
I think it'd be well done. And my last question is that a lot of controversy about video game violence, that first-person shooters influence violence, and this is, I don't know if you know this or not, but they actually do use Halo in military training to get snipers and other soldiers, elite soldiers, ready for their missions or whatever. Beforehand, they play Halo.
Right.
Do you think that video games influence violence in people?
This is it's an age-old question that goes back to Greek mythology. The violence that was in, Greek tragedies, and, do they influence, violence sort of outside the theater? Shakespeare and Shakespearean plays had, sex and violence and, all kinds of nasty people, who were in some of the greatest plays. Now we look at them as some of the greatest literary works in history. We went through this thing, and I was involved because my background is radio. I was involved quite a bit in the whole rock and roll thing. When rock and roll first came out, it was like, oh my God, rock and roll is going to lead to all kinds of debauchery and sinfulness and evilness and all of that. And then when heavy metal became, popular, there was the whole thing about, does this cause people to come out and go out and commit, heinous crimes? And now the target is video games. I don't think so. And again, going back to what my experience is in meeting the people who play the games religiously. Now, I think there are, some kids who spend way too much time in the basement and not as much time,
That's true.
outside,
That's true.
getting a little sunlight from time to time. But do I think I think that the stories of some sort of violent act being connected to a video game, I think you could make a strong case for saying that person or persons were predisposed anyway.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, the game actually, in and of itself, taking an otherwise normal, peace-loving person to go out and, destroy a city block. I just don't think that that's the way the human mind works. There is a responsibility that I think the game makers have, and the game players have. And in the case of, younger kids, the responsibility is to the parents.
Right.
Halo is not for everyone. Grand Theft Auto is not for everyone. So parental guidance suggested is not just a phrase. It actually means, parents, be aware of what your kids are doing. Be aware of what your kids are watching on TV, what they're watching on the computer, what video games they're playing. But I think for the average, teenager and above, I just don't believe that they are the cause of somebody turning violent. So I think in many ways I think they can be a release. I think they can be.
I completely agree with you on that.
I think people can go out. You can play the game, and there is some avenue, for letting your aggression out that video games can provide. So better to shoot them up, and do, as we say, a bug hunt on your Xbox,
Exactly.
than to go out and do it on the street. So
Exactly. As far as, when I go to work and everything like that, if I have a stressful day, I like to go home, I like to relax.
Sure.
I'll sit there, have a beer, and I'll play whatever game I want.
Yeah.
And it's, have a good time playing it and whatnot. I'm not going to sit there and, as we'll take Halo, for example. Oh, I'm Master Chief. I'm shooting the Covenant. I'm going to go outside and shoot the Covenant.
right. Yeah.
I just...
Now, first of all, there is no covenant
Exactly.
out there.
There is no Covenant.
And you don't beat up your little sister, so
Exactly. It's just-
it's all good.
It makes no sense why people think that video games...
Well,
are
I think,
violence.
like I said, historically, there's always going to be a target. There, and I think in a lot of cases, it's deferring where the real responsibility lies, and the real responsibility lies with the individual himself, or in the case of younger kids, with the parents. And I think if we had if people took parental guidance more seriously, there might be a lot less going out on the street that is of a violent nature.
I completely agree with you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Downs, Mike from Console Alliance. I really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And take it easy.